Hey guys, welcome to today's video. This is Martin from martinmixing.com, and today I want to talk to you about de-essing and show you a few different ways of how it can be done. Let's do it. Okay, so for this, let's jump right into logic. I have a vocal prepared here that has quite a few S's right in the first sentence of it. So I'll show you 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways in how you can de-ess your vocals, starting with some basic methods and some old school methods. I'll show you how to work kind of a dedicated de-esser, and then I want to show a few more unconventional ways of how to do it as well. So let's jump right into it. So the vocal that we'll be working with today is this short phrase. Let's have a quick listen.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Okay, so we have a lot of S's going on. I think this is perfect to showcase how to use a de-esser. But before we do that, I want to make sure that the vocal sounds as good as it can be before doing any other further modifications. So personally, I like to mix my vocals to be as good as they possibly can be without the de-esser, and then put in the de-esser as kind of a last resort when nothing works. So in this vocal, I can hear that we will need some corrective EQ. We will need a bit of top end, which already makes me worry that we'll have a bit more of the sharp S's, which we'll probably have to take care of. But let's just have a look. I have a few things prepared. So first and foremost, we start with the kind of mandatory low cut and a couple of dips in the frequency spectrum that just poke out a bit too much.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So this sounds a little bit more linear, a bit cleaner. Let's see what we have removed.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always...
So now I want to take care of a bit of the dynamics and add some more treble into this. Let's look what I've done here.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So just some LA2A compression, but before that a bit of EQ. Vocals like this, I like to EQ into compressors because I know I'll be boosting a lot of things and I want those boosted regions to also affect the compression, because in this case I know I'm using a lot of treble boost, so I don't want it to stick out too much. And indeed, I think this already solves a lot of the de-essing problems, to be honest. So this is probably my step number 1 or my method number 1. Instead of using an EQ like this after the compressor, so let me just show you.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So you can hear the S's just poke out instantly a lot more. Why? Because first we have flattened out the vocals basically. They become, this is 10 dB of compression, which is what I recommend when you use an LA2A kind of compressor, because that's where they sound best, in my opinion. But when I compress first and then I boost the frequencies, then those boosts will be much more obvious and will be not controlled by the compressor.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So this way works much better for me. We have still all the benefits from these boosts that I've done, but we get none of the disadvantages, which is getting a bit too much of that harsh top end. Also, as vocalists perform, they'll jump in different frequency ranges. So if I boost, let's say 12K and he sings a really, really high note, then that will poke out a lot if I have the EQ after the compressor. But if I have the EQ running into the compressor, that high note will be attenuated evenly. So we get, the boosted presence in other notes that might be lower in the frequency spectrum. And when he sings something really high that might have a bit more treble, that will get compensated for automatically by the compression. Then, one thing I noticed was this whistle. So again, before jumping straight into de-essing, I want to make sure that everything else is fixed with my vocals. So I have this dynamic EQ. If you don't have something like this, you can use a really narrow multiband, but I really recommend having some form of really narrow or versatile dynamic EQ in your arsenal. Let's have a look at this.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So the vocal has this whistle that I wanted to get rid of, so I used these settings. You can have a look at how I set this up, just to get rid of that, just to manage that one whistle a lot better.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Okay, so this works, and then just to warm it up a little bit, I have added this Pultec style EQ, which I really like.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
It just makes things bigger in a really pleasant way. So this is essentially how I would fix this vocal, how I would mix this vocal. And now we can have a look at different methods of de-essing. So obviously the most precise way would be taking an EQ or even just a volume fader and automating it for every S. But you know, who wants to do that? That just takes a lot of time, and there's automated ways to do that for us. Let me jump right into, the most convenient and the most self-explanatory way in how to de-essing a vocal, which is using a dedicated de-esser. I know that many default standard de-essers are not very good. And I find that this one by Iosis is, to me, kind of the best de-esser that I ever tried, to be honest. So this is cheating to some extent. I will still show you this, but many of you might not have this. If you do have the Slate package, it will have this though, so I really encourage you to use it. I have this set to the male singing preset, and I have modified that a little bit. Let's have a look.
It's always Christmas in.
So what I really like about this is that it really highlights where the issues are.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Then I can set my de-esser to really just affect that range.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Let's push it to the extreme.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in.
So this sounds, of course, very unnatural.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in.
But it works. This just really works, and you can add a little bit of grit to it as well with the smooth and these settings. So there's a lot about this one, but I really like it. It really works. But of course, this, you might not have this, so this is irrelevant for this particular video. Then we have method number 2, which I think most of you will have some form of multiband compressor even in your DAW. And I have set up the FEP filter one.
It's always
where you essentially do the same. You kind of narrow in into the particular range that you want to compress.
It's always Christmas in.
And then you just compress it.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in.
To me, this really works, and it doesn't have to be the FEP filter one. Even the basic, Even the basic Logic multipressor, any that you have will work. So you can bypass channel 1, 2, and even 4, I would say. So with the stock one, you just have to play around a little bit with the frequencies here. It's a bit more cumbersome, it's a bit more inconvenient, I would say, but you can get the same result. So let's just solo this band that I have set up here.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
You can probably move it even higher, let's just see.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Yep.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in.
And then with the ratio, you can really push it so that, it catches the S's, but pushes them even more.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So this is another way of doing it, just using a simple multiband compressor to take care of the job. It's ideal. You can definitely work this. Is it the best solution? Maybe not, but it definitely works. Then we have another solution, which for simplicity's sake I've demonstrated here in this way. What you can also do is you can make a copy of your vocal. If you don't have, so if you really don't have a multiband compressor, if you really don't have a good de-esser, then you can use this method as well. And what this is I've made a copy of the vocal, which is here Audio 35 now, and I applied this particular EQ to it. To really highlight those S's, and then I'll hit Control B to bounce in place. Let's include effects. Yeah, here we go. And then we have this particular file here, which we'll use as the sidechain input to a compressor that we set up on the actual vocal. So here we will select this particular audio file, and then we'll set up our compressor with this particular file controlling the compression. So what this means is that because we have routed this audio file into the sidechain of our compressor that is on the lead vocal, this means that only the harsh frequencies will now control the compression on this compressor. For this I use a really hard knee, so I really want when an S comes in immediately to start compressing. Makeup gain off, ratio as high as possible, so it's really tiny peaks even will trigger the compression. Threshold will set later. Attack 1 millisecond, I want it really fast, and release 5 milliseconds, the fastest setting possible basically, so that when the S's are over, it immediately releases so you don't get any artifacts. So now let's have a play with it.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So you can see with these settings and with playing with the threshold, the S's get attenuated quite well, while the rest is being left alone. But you have to keep in mind that this compressor now acts on the vocal as a whole. It doesn't separate it into individual frequency bands. It's just that the audio that controls the compressor is really filtered, which highlights the S sounds, okay?
It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So this is actually really cool, and you can hear it's really strong. We have about 10 dB of compression here, so let's dial it in a little bit more.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Let's put the threshold a little bit higher. I really only want the S's to control these, to control this compression.
It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in Siberia. It's always Christmas in. It's always Christmas in Siberia.
So this really seems to be working for me, to be honest. I quite like it. It's a bit more of a complicated setup, but indeed this is how you would do it in a more traditional way. So take your actual lead vocal, copy it over to another track, filter it really, so really just highlight the S's, and then run that file back into a compressor on your actual vocal. And this is one other way of doing it.
It's always Christmas in Siberia.
Okay, so these are my top 3 methods of de-essing a vocal. So there's plenty of opportunity for everyone, even with limited plugins out there, to achieve really good de-essing. If nothing works, I would say copying the lead vocal to another track and using any kind of stock compressor as a de-esser is a surefire way to achieve really good results. It might take a little bit of fidgeting and adjusting, but it will definitely work, and you have extremely tight control over what happens with this compressor. Okay, so I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. Let me know what other topics I can cover for you. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. And until then, happy mixing, take it easy, bye bye.